is definitely coming.
Oh, good.
But since it's after 3, I think that we will probably go ahead and get started to respect the time of those of you who are here. You have the March minute meetings that were sent to you for review. Did anybody have any corrections to the minutes? Okay, if not, those are approved. Today is a follow-up to our meeting in May where we discussed the Inflation Reduction Act funding opportunities. And Terry, we are sorry that, oh, hey, there's Amy. Hey, Amy. We were just getting started. Because a couple of you were not at the May meeting and didn't get to hear the presentation from Monroe Consulting, we are going to begin with a brief overview. Mark will be doing that here in a minute. And that's going to be followed by presentations from 3 of our members, Aaron Gill and Stephen Smith and Kent, about the efforts of their organization as they're related to energy efficiency and electrification grants. Then we'll have a period of, after each speaker, we'll have questions, and then KUB is going to share an outline of the communications plan that they're developing to acquaint customers with opportunities under the Act, and they want to get your input to that before they finalize that plan. We expect all of this is probably going to take us right up to 4:30. So since Aaron's not here yet, Kent, and Stephen wants to go after Aaron, I'm going to flip everything. Aaron and Stephen are talking about the Inflation Act, and I believe, Kent, you've got a presentation that's a little bit more like community engagement on weatherization, correct?
Well, community engagement is the whole point of everything that
Yeah.
I'm presenting here. But it's Inflation Reduction Act for sure.
Okay.
Because energy efficiency relates to that, and I'm wondering, do we have the little video?
Do you want to start with that?
Yeah,
Well,
let's start.
I'm sorry, I kind of got ahead of myself.
Oh,
I was
okay.
just getting sorted out.
Oh.
Let's let Mark go ahead. And
Oh,
that's
yeah,
my
yeah,
fault.
I'm sorry.
And do a real brief overview, and then we're going to go to you.
Okay,
Kent.
good.
Sure. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Some of you are here at the May meeting, and just as a reminder, probably back in around the first of the year, KUB engages the services of a consultant, West Monroe Partners, to do a comprehensive assessment of the Inflation Reduction Act to see what opportunities might be available for helping to fund KUB sustainability projects, but maybe even more importantly, what funding opportunities are available for our customers, and making sure we learn that, and so we can communicate that to our customers. So they did come to the May meeting and made a presentation, and just as a brief overview under the IRA, for KUB, we looked at they looked at several of our projects, and one in particular, community solar project, which is going quite well, by the way. But we looking at getting a direct payment credit for that. That is sort of the corollary to what private companies get investment tax credits. Now, municipalities can get direct payment credits. So that will offset a portion of our community solar project and will allow us, if it's ever comes available to apply for, which we hope is soon in 2024, that we'll be able to lower the price per share of our community solar project. So that's one example of KUB. Another is with our flexibility provision under the TVA contract. There may be incentives and tax credits or direct payment credits that can help fund those projects as well and help defray some of the cost on that. So that's all perspective and looking down the road a little bit for us. But yes, sir.
It may be relevant later on. With the TVA program, my understanding was it was originally 5%, and they theoretically, but then when it was actually figured on your usage, it was probably more like 3%, but they said that they were willing to potentially up that a little bit. Is that still in negotiation? Have they approved? Have they given you more bandwidth? Because one of the things that we may talk about later is the Solar for All, which is $7 billion that's coming. And TVA, based on the way they've got you guys leveraged with those contracts, would have to allow you to play in that game maybe, because if you were to win, I think the $7 billion is only going to be spread out over 60 recipients.
60 grants.
Yeah, so there's potentially a lot of money, but that could take you all out of your limit that TVA has. I mean, it sounds like you all have looked at this. Do you have any idea? Where does that come in?
As far as the limit, Right now, it's like 81 megawatts, and that's what it was when we first entered into the partnership agreement and calculated it. So we've done a recent recalculation. What did that do? That added 1 megawatt to it.
Okay.
So,
All right. Yeah, yeah.
so I'm not aware right now that they're looking to increase that.
Okay, because we had understood that was under consideration, but it hasn't gone
Well,
through yet.
I hope it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
yeah.
I have not heard anything directly, Stephen, about
Okay.
them
Well,
changing
when
that.
Jeffrey Lash came to the KUB during the negotiations for the contract, he said it's a floor, not a ceiling.
That's right.
And I just got news that Teresa Broyles-Applin from NES at Vanderbilt University announced that they were pushing for 15% in their flex agreement.
Okay.
So
Well, that's
Yeah, it
good.
needs to be pushed. And the question is, can y'all look at those as far as like microgrids and stuff to do quote unquote behind the meter that allows you to do things outside, under your cap, but still do innovative things? Because I think it's solar plus storage that you can do in that, so that's.
You can do storage too as
Yeah,
part of that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, one project that we're potentially looking at, again, this is down the road somewhat, still in its infancy stages, we're hoping that we might be able to have that plus a storage project associated with it, and maybe also community solar as
Yeah,
part
yeah.
of that as well.
Yeah, yeah.
That.
would it be possible for a community to receive such a grant and own the community solar project themselves and thereby reap more of the benefits?
Well, I think they only award the grant to government entities.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
municipalities, states,
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
but a municipality
Yeah.
might own it though, right?
But one thing when Aaron gets here, maybe one of the things we could do is see whether maybe there could be a resolution from both the mayor and the city council that asks TVA to up that limit so that y'all could apply for the grant or something. All right, well, that was the
Okay.
question. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good,
Okay.
good.
So, but also we spent time talking about customer-facing opportunities, which is obviously very important. And right now, there's currently available residential energy tax credits for home improvements, for energy efficiency improvements. That's available right now. So we'll be educating our customers about those, because that's for work being done you could be doing right now and be able to get a credit on your taxes that you file in 2024. And then there's some big rebate programs as well. One is for electrification, the other is for home energy efficiency upgrades, improvements as well. And those vary. They have some pretty significant amounts. On the electrification, you can get up to $14,000. It sort of stacks on basically different types of improvements that you do, and it varies by income status as well on that. And then on the other rebate program, it also has an income-based component, but it is basically, it's just that the benefit goes down the higher the level of income, but everybody can be potentially eligible for that, if I recall correctly on that. So it's a lot of good stuff, to put it succinctly, that's available for our customers. And that's one of the things we want to talk about a little bit later, is getting your ideas about how we can help communicate that to our customers as well. So it's exciting things. One other thing about the rebate programs, I think I mentioned this last time, the money's being allocated out to the state energy offices, and the state energy offices determine how that's going to be administered. And I think the state of Tennessee's share of all that's around $370 million, I think, in total. It's about $185 million for each rebate program. And TVA has made an effort, an attempt, and has been talking to the state energy office about being the administrator of that. So I followed up with them just earlier this week, and they think a decision probably won't be forthcoming about how it's going to be administered until early 2024. That's what we know right now. But anyway, TVA is pretty well set up with their Energy Right programs, their home uplift programs to administer that. So we'll see what the state decides. So,
Those of you who weren't here last time, do y'all have any questions of Mark or about that in general before we get to Aaron and Stephen and Kent? Are you good? Ken, I'm going to go back to my original order because Aaron is more directly related to what Mark was talking about. So we're going to start with Aaron, then Stephen, and then Kent. So are you settled? Are you good? That's okay. You had another meeting, I know. Well, Aaron's going to talk a little bit about the city's research and activities in relation to the Inflation Reduction Act.
Great. Well, and thanks for the discussion last time to kind of cue this up, because if it wasn't clear from even the brief discussion at the last meeting, it certainly will if you've looked at any of the myriad websites the federal government has set up, that there's just a lot of opportunity, and they just keep evolving. So things that were kind of on the horizon are increasingly becoming solidified. There's both ramped up funding for long-standing programs that the city's been able to take advantage of, and then also new programs that we have our eyes on and are looking at and tackling, but also just kind of in some ways keeping ourselves abreast of what's out there, but not necessarily coming up yet with some firm strategy. So there's all of that. So I've kind of bracketed these into different categories. The first is active applications, and I can go through those, and then I'll talk a little bit about some things that are definite and then others that are on the horizon. So pretty exciting amounts of money that are out there. One of what I'll call kind of an Easter egg that was out of the bipartisan infrastructure, or actually I think this was the Inflation Reduction Act, is this climate pollution reduction grant. That's a new program, and it's out of the EPA. And we are eligible as the Knoxville Metropolitan Statistical Area. I think we're like 64 out of 67 that are awarded. So it was kind of by formula to the largest MSAs in the country, and we just made the cut. So rah, rah, Knoxville. And it's specific about climate action planning. And so in talking with the Regional Transportation Planning Organization and gauging some of the interest from other municipalities in the region, it kind of became clear that the city of Knoxville was in the best position to be the direct applicant. So we have pursued that. We are planning on receiving those funds, but they are funds that apply toward the region as a whole. And the idea is that it supports a regional effort around understanding climate emissions and then also supporting planning efforts. So of course, within the city limits, we have done that for years. We know our metrics, we have a plan, but there's been a lot that's been talked about as part of that around how do we build up dashboards, how do we make those metrics more understandable to community members, how do we measure progress a little bit more easily than what ultimately has been a pretty cumbersome methodology. So we hope to pursue some consultants to help us with that, but then the idea is that we don't want this funding to just be limited to city limits, so we will build tools that are broadly applicable to the region, but as you know, it's up to those other jurisdictions whether they want to do anything with them. So we are hopeful that they will, and we're working with the TPO, making that a regional resource. Going down to the second one on the list, this is kind of the first set of funding that's come out, $100,000 for publicly accessible charging infrastructure, particularly along the Broadway corridor. That was informed both by a city survey around needs, but then also the kind of a mapping tool that our sustainability team developed that looks at it from an equity lens. And Kent, you have been a part of those conversations of saying, let's make sure we don't just put chargers in where rich people live, but also in places where we hope to see more from diverse income groups. So we are very hopeful that that will come through. You know, we'll see. We put it into the box. We'll see what comes out. This next one, Safe Streets and Roads for All, this is what I'd call kind of it's mobilized around roadway safety, but one of the top recommendations from our Climate Council is around making it safer, more accessible, more convenient to use alternative transportation, including walking and biking and using public transit in Knoxville, and that's exactly what this grant is all about. So it is a DOT, Department of Transportation grant, but we're really excited about the potential for projects that improve walkability and bikeability to help and support our climate reduction strategies. So that grant is actually due on Monday, the 10th. So the two projects that are kind of the heartbeat of that are infrastructure and, intersection improvements around particularly dangerous intersections on Magnolia Avenue, east of where we've done the big streetscape project. If you've driven out Magnolia from downtown, these are actually past Cherry Street, where we've had some fatal crashes recently. And then the other corridor is Broadway in front of the Kroger near Fulton High School, where that is the busiest bus stop. And it's a location that not only serves a lot of walkers who are going whether to jobs or to school at Fulton, to some of the healthcare resources in that area, but there's also populations of individuals who are living unsheltered that are often in that corridor and have been vulnerable to a lot of pretty serious accidents. So we're excited about those two projects. And then the last one on here, which is another formula grant, which is exciting because it's, we're not competing for it. We will get this money, but it's not that much, is the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant money, and just about a little over $200,000. This was a program that really had its start under the kind of Obama stimulus era, and it jump-started the city's sustainability initiatives back in 2008. At that point, the money was $2 million, and now we have $200,000, so it's an order of magnitude lower. But we're excited to use this in support specifically of some of our city building net carbon zero goals that we've we've signed up for a DOE low carbon challenge, and so this $200,000 will allow us to put some pretty cool technologies on. I think it's the CAT building, perhaps Brian would know the exact buildings, but city facilities, because it's just such a small amount of money, it's one of those we're not going to be able to do as much with it as we could when we had that first round back in 2008. Okay, then there are active applications that are what I'll call partner-led, but with really close city support that we've been pretty involved with. And the first of these, which is pretty significant, is around trees. So Trees Knoxville put in the application, but it's in close partnership with our urban forestry program. And I think KUB's urban forestry program was also involved in this, but really significant amount of trees that would go on public lands, but also be paired with workforce development efforts and some pretty neat engagement opportunities with disadvantaged communities. So we're really excited about that, very hopeful. This is a totally new program, so again, what it will look like and whether we will be competitive for it is yet to be seen, but we're very optimistic. And then there's a couple grants that we've actually just already been awarded. So this $3.6 million for CAT to continue their work to electrify their fleet was just awarded in the last few weeks. So that's great. We're excited to see that money. This is going to do some en-route overhead charging. Right now we charge all of our electric buses at the overnight depot maintenance center off of Magnolia, and this will do some of the fast overhead charging that will allow those buses to stay on the roads longer during the day. So that's great. And then we also have a small, composting program grant. This was another priority identified by our Climate Council to support organic diversion from the landfill. So that's exciting. Perhaps more discussion to come from our partners, but on the horizon, when we look ahead, Solar for All is a pretty significant new program that is specifically designed to support solar for low-income customers. We are really excited to see this. We don't yet know a ton about the mechanics. It's a new program, so the notice of funding opportunity was just released like in the last few days. More to come. This is a place, and I'll offer this for the group, the city probably is not in the best position to lead this application, I'll just be really honest, but we would love to support and we'd love to be part of kind of a partnership. So I think, eager to hear maybe what Sierra Club and SACE are working on. We've also had folks express some interest in an opportunity called Renew America's Nonprofits, and this, again, has to be partner-led. We would not be able to apply for it if we wanted to, but it is a pretty neat opportunity to provide financial assistance to nonprofits in local communities, and we would love to see that money come to Knoxville. So we've heard some interest. At this point, I haven't heard that there's a clear, hey, we're going to submit it and own it, but there's a lot of interest, including from United Way, for example, that sees this as a really great option for nonprofits in our community. And then this last one, I think it might be described as like, this is the big one when it comes to electric vehicle charging. There's competitive funding, so the state got a lot of money by formula to support electric vehicles, and they have a plan that really is focused on gaps in the charging network, and Knoxville is not a gap because we actually have decent coverage for electric vehicle charging. So we are hopeful that the competitive opportunity that's still to be announced will be a place where the city could apply directly for some funds and fill what we would consider gaps in our local network. Obviously, the state is focused on kind of the cross-state highway system and how do you make sure that there's charging amenities every 50 miles, even on less traveled state routes. So we're hoping that we'll see an opportunity to apply for local gap funding through that electric vehicle infrastructure grant. All right, that was my rundown. I'm happy to do questions now, or maybe we wait until we've heard more.
No, I think we'll do after each speaker. And I know
Great.
Stephen, I think, has some specific things he wants to ask about. Did you not?
I was just, I was glad to hear you talk a little bit about the climate pollution reduction grant. One of the things we've been looking at is the multifamily home work that's being done by a group called ICAST. They received right under, I think, $60 million from THDA to do work through the formulaic funding that came through to the state entity. There is discussions going on between the State Energy Office and THDA and ICAST about also there's a portion of some of the formulaic funding that the Energy Office got that they would like to supplement to build up on that, because even with $60 million, the need for the multifamily is so vast that it's going to require substantially more money. One of the things that we had talked to Brian about, and was that in the and I don't know that we got this specific with them because these grants are starting to roll out, is that in the climate pollution reduction grant, as I understand it, you get money to do some of your initial planning. Then I guess what is it, next March you have the first tranche of sort of what you see as priority focus, and then there's another tranche that you go after. And so what we were hoping would be that you all consider modeling for what the multifamily sector investment, in other words, if there was money that was awarded, because once the city has gone through and done some of this initial planning and prioritization, it makes them eligible for competitive grants that come down the pipeline later, is the way I understand it. And one of the concepts that we've been doing is we've had conversations with Memphis, Chattanooga, Nashville, and Knoxville about, as some of those competitive opportunities unfold, that if there's interest, and it's coalition of the willing, whoever wants to do it, but we're hoping that all four would participate, it might be a way to aggregate around a portion of some of this competitive grants to go after the multifamily sector. THDA has agreed to play the role as the recipient to dole that money out to the various municipalities. And what'll happen is, as we've already got the $60 million in the pipeline being developed through all four of the large urban markets, if the Energy Office lets go, that'll take that up another notch. And then if the cities will put into their planning that multifamily is a portion of what they're looking at and have to be exclusive to that, then that opens up the window to do potentially an aggregated opportunity through all the urban markets in Tennessee to go after some of these even larger funds that are going to come in competitive tranches. And we think that if the urban markets aggregate together, that may actually increase the chance and the weight of them being selected in a competitive format. So I don't know if Brian's talked to you at all about that, but the benefit of ICAST is that they do multifamily as opposed to single family as their specialty. They have a whole vendor network through, HVAC vendors and others to where they can come in and do it at scale and efficiently. And there's really, up until this point, there's been nobody that has been able to scale like they have. And so I think this is an underserved sector that all of a sudden, with this influx, so it's down the pipeline. Obviously, y'all have got to go through your planning and everything, but that was one of the things that we wanted to flag because we're collaborating with ICAST. They're a nonprofit out of Colorado that we know some of the folks on, and they've got a good track record. We think it's a way to crack a very difficult sector. So we're hoping that we won't lose the focus on that, and we can stack these resources up to where we make a sizable dent in the overall volume and need that has been underutilized, because TVA doesn't have a multifamily program like that, and nobody tends to be able to go to scale like that because the money just hasn't been at this kind of volume to be able to tackle the big issues. So that's one.
Mr. Stephen, can I ask,
Yeah.
just for remind
Sure.
me, on the $60 million, that's already been.
That's already done. Formula, huh?
I'm sorry, I missed it. Was that a particular source?
I think it was either through Bill or Ira. It came through one of the.
I guess I meant like, is that the Weatherization Assistance Program money, or is that a different program that was supporting that 60 million?
It was part of weatherization, but I think it was bigger than what they had, it was a different, I think it was a different pot than they've historically been doing. And I can get you the details on it. There's so many, there's so many different things that are coming, and Chris and Forrest on my staff have been tracking it very carefully. So that money was awarded formulaically to THDA. I think THDA got like 64, and they gave like 58 or something, close to 60 to ICAST. They've already started, so that's in play now.
Have they, is it still to be, if they've already started, so have they already determined who's getting what portion of this?
Well, my understanding from talking to them is that they have started, ICAST has connections with some of the building owners and some of the folks behind some of the
Okay.
infrastructure. And so those conversations have started, and they have started building their contractor network in the various markets, I believe, to be able to do it. And so my understanding is that Knoxville, as well as the other three, will receive a portion of that. And what we're hoping is that to get clarity from the Energy Office about, the Energy Office got a large formulaic funding opportunity too, and I think there's a request potentially up to $80 million additional dollars out of their portion to go into this across the urban markets. And so the 60's done. The negotiations are in negotiation to add some additional. And then that will start to play out, and then based on what cities potentially write this in, and if they want to then have it be a portion of some of their competitive, as competitive money becomes available to be able to go after, there could be additional funds that could be allocated out of, if there was success in that. THDA, I understand, is interested in potentially going after their own competitive tranches too. So we'll have to, I think at some point everybody's going to have to commit either we're all in or we're all out. We're not calling that question yet because there was some, sensitivity as everybody was trying to figure things out. But it's too early to sort of call the question, are you going in on the competitive grants? Because some of this early planning has to be done in the next year and a half or so.
Can I ask if anybody else has questions about any of the projects the city, or Aaron described to you, the city's into, which are very exciting projects?
Aaron, what makes other cities more competitive than Knoxville receiving these grants?
I think we're still figuring that out. I will say that, some of these new programs, and in particular, Reconnecting Communities is a grant program that was brand new, and both the city as well as, let me get this right, we put in a grant application for Reconnecting Communities with KCDC. to do some really cool segments of projects around urban renewal areas and connecting East Knoxville in with downtown. We didn't get that grant. We got some great feedback around, here's places where we can improve the application, and we're hoping that in the next round we'll be more competitive. Some of these new pots of monies are just brand new, and so it is yet to be kind of seen exactly what the secret sauce is to write a winning application. I think in particular, one of the places where Knoxville has a lot to say but hasn't necessarily collectively gotten the habit of saying consistent language is around what the federal government describes as its kind of Justice 40 goals, where they want to make sure that they're targeting investment in disadvantaged communities. And we talked a little bit in the last meeting about the definition of what that is. And so I think that's where, again, we have a lot to say as a community, but it hasn't necessarily been a very concise or consistent narrative. And so that's something that our office is really thinking a lot about, both with the work with the African American Equity Restoration Task Force, but then also some of the work that we've done across departments to say, how do we apply an equity lens to these investments that we're already making so that we can tell that story to the feds in a way that's really compelling. There's just a lot of, the other grant that I'll give an example of scale is called RAISE, which used to be Build or something, and then it was Tiger. I mean, it's like the same program, but it gets repackaged every president. So that one we're a little bit more familiar with. We weren't successful. There were 2 applications that came in from Knoxville, and neither were successful. The scale, I think they received 1,600 or so applications from across the country. So, it's just, there's a lot of competition, and, cities usually apply 3 times before they get it, and some cities never get it. So that's one where it's like you create the baseline application and then you continue to reiterate it and make it stronger every time. Our transit grant that we won, that's a grant that we've been successful in before, and now the money is just getting kind of built out. So we're excited because I think those are some places where we've been really successful. And then I'm also, the application's not gone in yet, but I'm very bullish about the Safe Streets for All program too, because again, there's just such a compelling set of data and pre-work that's been done around our Vision Zero planning at the city that, fingers crossed, we're going to be a competitive one for that. But, the jury's out. You do have to, I think, have a really good narrative around how you have applied an equity lens and engaged communities. And our building, they want to have pretty shovel-ready and predictable success projects. And so I think going for things that have a tried and true methodology, that have partners, we've been successful in the past getting big money with CAC because this is work they've done. And so, we're hopeful that building on some of those strengths rather than starting from scratch will be an ingredient for success. But I would say the jury's definitely still out.
And maybe I can add to that. I know our national organization, which is the National Community Action Partnership, is really watching some of these things and looking at the low-income solar. And of course, they will be providing technical assistance workshops and things of that sort to kind of help their partner agencies, which would include us, enter into, effective relationships with partners like the city and others. And they are, very active in the equity issues and can provide, I think, some of the support for incorporating more of that into some of our approaches than we've maybe had previously. And as Erin said, that's a very high priority and scoring area to be competitive in these on these grants. So we'll be participating in all of that, sending people to the meetings, and then bringing back whatever we learn. But of course, a lot of other people will be at these meetings also. So it does kind of build the capacity network wide, and then it's how you're able to put it together locally and get it done. So, and we've been fairly successful with that in the past, and I think we can probably refocus some things and maybe do that again.
Before we move on to any additional comments about what SACE is doing, does anybody have any other questions of Erin about the city projects?
Yeah, a couple. Talk a little bit about the overhead charging. and the grant, which I read about. And one thing I read said that it was important to have that because it would permit the addition of more electric buses into the fleet. Can you explain that?
I think I can attempt to. So, generally speaking, you know, the buses that we have now, we don't quite run the full shift of CAT. So I think they start operations 6 a.m. and go till 10. One of our electric buses can't run that whole shift.
Right.
So, in order to use more electric buses on the road, the idea is that if you're going to replace the whole fleet, you got to have kind of just a consistent ability to keep those buses on the road for longer. So overhead is part of that. So the idea is not that it's like, oh, this is for one route. We would be putting it at the CAT station to where pretty much all of the buses coming in could benefit from that kind of quick hit.
Yes.
Keeping them on the road longer. And then the bottom line is that, yeah, if we're going to have a full fleet over time by 2040 of 72 plus long haul buses, you got to have as much charging infrastructure as you can get.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good.
That's not a very technical description, so
No,
people can
I do
more of
get
it.
that.
Yeah.
Actually, I've seen other bus districts that do that same thing, so I get that.
Yep.
Gaps in charging infrastructure locally. You just talked about the big one is charging infrastructure. We can fill in the gaps in local charging networks. Where are the gaps locally?
So if you think about driving out Broadway, there's nothing.
I know.
We now have one in Burlington, but if you drive out Magnolia, there's nothing.
Yeah.
We do, obviously, Kingston Pike has quite a bit. There's Chapman is another kind of place where you don't see as much as you head out Chapman toward Sevierville.
Yes.
So like I said, the map is pretty good, and we had that survey results that really tried to say where is their interest, where are places that people are going
Yes.
for a time, and then overlapping that with equity considerations to say where are there opportunities to do public available charging in places where it would make sense.
Yeah, good. I guess the intent of my question is about how to help lower income communities take advantage of electric driving, and I know you're concerned about that. But one thing I noticed in just talking to people in various communities was they didn't know. For example, a lot of people in East Knoxville don't know about the Charger of Burlington. It's getting used. PlugShare shows frequent little check-ins on that. But people will adopt if they know they can charge the car. And so it's important to have the chargers have publicity about them and for them to be visible. The one in Burlington's great. I think it's at a place where there's lots of parking and it's visible in front of the fire department there. But I was also thinking about just having one on the street, maybe working off a streetlight pole or something like that near an apartment house so that people could park within sight of their room and stuff. Because the advantage of electric driving is you can charge it while you sleep.
Yeah, no, and I would not disagree with that at all. I think one of the things, and again, this NEVI funding, NEVI is the acronym, we're waiting to see, because I think this goes back a little bit to that multifamily conversation. We would love to figure out what it looks like to kind of facilitate somehow getting chargers at multifamily apartments. You know, like opportunity charging while you're shopping or whatnot is great, but yeah, to your point, it's got to be close enough to where people live that it makes sense. So, yeah, more to come on that, but
Beautiful.
We're hopeful that that'll be a great. And then the other thing I think you all know with KUB, did we mention it last time that the downtown fast charger is in the works too. So we're thinking about level 2, kind of the slower overnight charging, as well as kind of that fast charge opportunity, and if there are places where the city can host more fast chargers.
And we have another fast charging station in South Knoxville.
That's great. So there's our Chapman. Yep.
And Kent. So Stephen, did you have additional
The
things
only
about
other-
stays?
Right, the only other thing that, well, we mentioned the Solar for All competitive grant, and unfortunately, I think that's on a relatively short fuse to get some initial stuff in, but we're looking across the region at what we can do. But I would love to see if there's any way that there could be, I mean, because Knoxville, years ago, you know, we worked to get it designated a solar city, and then, you know, there's been activities around Knoxville over the years around solar, and then, you know, the stuff that y'all have done recently. So there's at least a discernible track record within the constraints that TVA puts on you. And I mean, I don't know if there's thought of a way to think about it, but my understanding is that August 14th is the deadline, I think, for municipalities. I mean, like we talked about before Aaron came in earlier, you know, TVA's got that constraint relative to the percentage that they allow y'all to do, but maybe there'd be a way to appeal to them for some sort of variance, I don't know. And then, as was mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity with workforce development, low income, and other things. So we're looking for ways to keep Tennessee in the game, but I don't know if there's any ideas that people have.
Stephen, is the August 14th the notice of intent day? Or is that the actual application?
No, I think it's just the first step. So I think it's just a notice of intent. Yeah, let's see.
I think the application date's not that far behind it from what
I think the full application is due on the 26th of September.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a short fuse, real short fuse. And it, you know, it may not be doable in that time frame. I know we have lent our name in support of, you know, trying to look at partnering around some of the multifamily home stuff for Solar for All. Whether that can be, you know, shoehorned in there, I don't know. You know, that's something to think about. And I think the states have until July. I think July 31st is when states have to. And I think THDA may be putting a notice that they want to do it in. So we'll see. Yeah. So that's all I have. I was just, it'll be interesting to hear about, you know, talking about the rebates and all that other stuff, because they're how to keep educating on that. But as far as the grants, these are the things that seem to be on a short fuse, and Aaron's got a good list of what the city's looking at.
Just a follow-up, because I know there has been some conversation about the THDA opportunity, and my question around, like, what's the funding source? Because I think, if I understood from Brian, it's been a couple months since he's been able to last check in with your team. But, you know, I'll say this kind of for whomever benefits from it. You know, we really try to evaluate these partnerships on a case-by-case basis. So, you know, we want to know, one, what the funding source is, to know if there's other partners that we've already lent support to, just so that we, you know, sometimes it's okay. We submit letters of support to competing applications on a regular basis, but it's at least good to know the specifics there. And then I think in particular, what I asked about the funding source was a related, because I think, you know, we really see CAC as kind of our core weatherization assistance partner. And so just understanding the interplay between those funding sources. And, you know, I know at one point when this was originally brought up, one of the points of feedback was, if we're going to talk about weatherization assistance funding, we really need to have that conversation with the CAC alongside us, because we as the city wouldn't want to, you know, affirm a support of an approach that you all, CAC, weren't necessarily in the loop in, or didn't understand how one lever might impact this other lever over here. So, you know, again, I think to your point, it's a lot about how do these sources of funds interact with each other, and the state oftentimes has really good programming, but they may not have a very Knoxville-centric lens, because they're trying to address gaps and service providers in other places that don't have great partners like the CAC to work with. So we try to just kind of remain cognizant of that. And so I know that was one of the last questions where we had was, what are the different funding sources? What's the specific proposal that's being considered, and then how do we best lend our support behind that effort?
Yeah, and I think it's still to be determined when the competitive opportunities materialize. And so I think that, and our understanding was that most of the work that CAC was doing was with single family, focused more on single family as opposed to multifamily. I may be wrong, but
On the new grant that we got, or on our usual?
On your usual profile,
Yeah,
and then
we do single family. The state initiative that you're talking about is a multi-family approach, and as I understand it, they selected quite a few months back one statewide provider for
Right,
that.
right.
And nothing specific will be coming to any agency in Knoxville, but the services will be coming to residences in Knoxville when they get to it.
So this is ICAS, is what you're talking about, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, you're right,
That's
right,
the
right.
80 million to 60 million?
I think it's about
60,
six,
that's
I think it's
60.
60 in the formulaic, and then
Yeah.
they're gonna layer on some more, and my understanding is that, and this would be a conversation to have with the ICAS folks, is that they're building out that contractor network, because part of being able to scale, as I understand it, to take on these larger projects, is to get a more robust sort of network going with the contractors and everything. So I think hopefully this sort of lifts everybody, and that it makes things more accessible going down the road, we'll see. But to your question, Aaron, I think that the competitive stuff is still to be determined based on, we just want to make sure that Knoxville has a placeholder so that if there is a aggregated competitive thing, that y'all have at least flagged this as an opportunity, so that you're in the hunt for some of these competitive funds in that genre of going after the multifamily dimension. So if you model it, or you do whatever you need to do to sort of that, it has that advantage, just keeps the door open. And then when each one of the competitive grants will have, I think, sort of pros and cons for different groups, and then that's where you say, I'm in, I'm out, whatever. We have a coalition of willing. THDA does it, comes that way, however we want to do it.
I could just add, we did just get a fairly competitive grant with THDA for some $800,000. And we're going to be doing a number of things, but one of it's going to be focused on, I think it's just maybe 10, maybe a few more than that, homes that had already been weatherized that are going to receive some solar follow-up, particularly aimed at people who have medical devices in their homes. And so this was a fairly competitive application that we were able to submit. And I think the kickoff with THDA was like today.
Okay. Yep.
So it's very new.
Yeah.
And so we're just going to be looking forward. THDA is going to be doing the monitoring and the kind of grant oversight, and we're going to be doing the actual installations and all that. So if we can get some of these smaller things going and start having a little success,
Yeah.
that will really be very valuable on the scoring on the competitive grant, being able to actually point to some delivered outcomes.
Right.
And so we're working on that.
That's great.
We will deliver as many outcomes as we can.
Yep.
Okay. All right, Kent has prepared about a 10-minute slide presentation, and you ready to go, sir?
Yeah, I am. Can we do that? Well, we won't show the whole video, but I'll just say cut, The purpose of showing you the video is basically the idea of the trusted messenger that we've been asked by KUB to participate, along with SACE and SEED and 3 in helping build the list for energy efficiency upgrades. Well, this is not about that. It's about IRA, but it's an example of what I think is a good kind of messenger that creates trust in low-income communities. And so this is my friend Joanne here. Check it out.
Joanne McIntosh with the Tennessee chapter of the Sierra Club. And I'm here today to share with you some information about the Inflation Reduction Act, an act that was passed in August of 2022 that has lots of funding opportunities for us as individuals in the state of Tennessee, tax credits and rebates and so on. And we are going to look at a couple of those benefits today. So the major elements of the Inflation Reduction Act cover a lot of different areas. We did a presentation in January for Tennessee Sierra Club on home energy and infrastructure and also electric vehicles. And today we're going to share with you the information about electric vehicles. So electric vehicles, EVs, we call them. Why buy one? There's been a lot of hype. There's lots of good reasons to own one. Number one, less expensive fuel. You're paying 3 cents per mile or 100 plus equivalent miles per gallon in Tennessee when you drive an EV. There's less maintenance because there's fewer parts. They're very convenient. You can refuel at home at the charger or on the road at charging stations. EVs are much cleaner. There's no operating emissions, no greenhouse gases, which of course at Sierra Club we are very concerned about. And we're proud to say that in the state of Tennessee, our electricity is over 60% non-fossil fuel, mostly nuclear and hydro. And so that helps us be sure that we are not emitting to our electric company either. And the biggest reason, I think, for driving an EV is they are just plain fun to drive. I've been an EV owner since 2011. My first Nissan Leaf, I'm on my second, and I think I'm about to go to my third here shortly. I never regretted the decision to buy the Leaf, and I am excited about sharing this information and hope that folks will follow the lead and get one for themselves. So here's an overview on EVs from the Inflation Reduction Act. This act is going to make it easier and cheaper to purchase an electric vehicle. There are discounts up to $7,500 for new EVs, and for the first time ever, $4,000 discount for used EVs, helping middle-class Americans skip the gas pump and save on fuel costs. And in Tennessee, millions of people will be eligible for these discounts. So there are different types of discounts. There are upfront discounts, which are rebates at the point of sale. This means they come right off the price that you pay. Upfront discounts are not currently available for EVs, but they should be next year in 2024. Electric vehicle tax credits are subtracted from the amount of federal taxes that you owe. This means that you pay the full price when you're purchasing the EV, but the government pays you back at tax time. You can apply for a tax credit once every 3 years, so it's not a once-in-a-lifetime deal. And you can get a tax credit on a new EV, and if you want to buy a used EV, they are available to have both a new credit and a used credit applied for each VIN. So in other words, someone might have bought an EV new and applied for the new tax credit, and then a couple of years later, you buy that same vehicle used. The used credit is still available. And
Right, well, sorry to cut Joanne off there, but I thought that was an example.
Well, here's a rural woman sitting at a kitchen table telling you about EVs. I thought that was a kind of a different and interesting approach. And she's just completely relaxed and unassuming, kind of winking at you occasionally. And so that's the kind of exploration that we're making to see how we can communicate about this stuff in a way that doesn't sound, I don't know, what corporate and nerdy, but just people all getting together and exploring how we can make the transition away from pollution into clean energy. So can we hook the slideshow up there? I just have 7 slides, just to be very short. I don't want to go on too long because I really want to hear your comments. This is really about the work that we're doing with SACE and 3Cubed and SEED on getting people to apply for the home uplift energy efficiency upgrades. And Mark and the leadership at KUB came to us, I guess it was late last year, and we were talking about what we could do to get more people on the list. And true to character, Stan Johnson said, "Where's the money?"
And so there actually was money involved, and we're getting, each group is getting a little bit for our part of it. And for our part, we've been exploring visiting over at SEED and hanging out with community members over there and trying to find out the best way to communicate this. And in talking with Stan, the SEED is the leader of this group of 4. And I said, well, Stan, there's a bunch of different things that Sierra Club members thought we might offer, but what do you think? You're the leader. And he said, do the video. So I went, oh, okay, well, we'll do the video. So the video that we have in mind will document the progress of energy, the upgrade program. I understand now there's about 330 homes that have been upgraded so far this year.
It's actually 430.
Yeah, I knew you'd do that to me. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm behind the times. But one of the things that we're asked to deal with was a feeling of mistrust in the community. And that's why we wanted to approach this from the point of view of a trusted messenger, like the woman sitting at her kitchen table, someone who's just a neighbor and is talking to you. So, by the way, congratulations for the award from TVA, because KUB is #1 in the TVA service area, right, in terms of participation in the Home Uplift program. And so I was at the meeting there and I went, oh, that's cool. So the problem that we're supposed to resolve here is that the list suddenly got way short in the wake of the pandemic, and I think there were a bunch of different reasons for that, but KUB doesn't want to run out of people to do the upgrades because they've got contractors with trained people who do a good job and they want to keep them working. And I don't know if the secured funding could be lost, but it sounded good when I was writing this. But our solution, next slide, is, as I've explained, the 4 of us are getting together to help build up the list. And we're going to create a video to show the program's progress and address this mistrust in the community. And we're going to approach the project through the individual personal experience of community members who are trying to access the project. Next slide. So this is Shelley Obar, and we joined forces with her. She's a video instructor at UT. She's absolutely gassed about doing the program. This is just a picture from her website, but this is the way she looks when we talk about energy efficiency upgrades. And she's going to, we're developing the script now. She's going to create a shot breakdown list, shoot, edit the video, and do final post-production. And our script right now covers about 2/3 of the material we want to put on the video. And we've taken those script elements over to SEED, and we've worked with community members on the script. We've actually had them read it like actors auditioning for a part, and they basically feel that the script seems genuine and engaging, and that it would be persuasive to community members. I say we participated in 3, but I've been over there to other related events where they're doing grant applications and things like that, and just seeing how people work with the community. And but most especially in the community engagement workshops where people from the community come in and hear about it all. And also, Chastity has provided us with some video materials from both KUB and TVA. And one of those videos we really liked, I'm not sure, maybe it was shot in Memphis, I don't know, but it showed community members sitting at tables with what looked like utility staff, and they were educating each other about the program and helping each other fill out the applications. Now, in participating in these community workshops, it seemed to me that the application was the stumbling block. People aren't applying. And when I looked at the application, I started to understand why. Any program that is income qualified is nerdy and complicated. It has to be. There's no way out of it. So people need help through that. And I got some inspiration from my daughter, Angeline. I'm so proud of her. She worked in the nurse family partnership as a nurse partner. And her job was to work with low-income women and help them get benefits, apply for food stamps and all of that. Nicholas Kristof, a writer for the New York Times, said, "This is the best poverty reduction program in America." And it's been there since, I think, for 30 years or so. And so children that were born into the program have grown up and had their own children. So the poverty-reducing benefits go through the generations. But she said, what you have to do is fill out the application for them. She would go in there and sit with a client and go right through all the nerdy aspects of an application for SNAP or whatever, medical programs and things like that. And I think we need to do that, and we need to put that in the video. So next slide, please. What we have yet to do is complete the script. And to do so, we want to connect with participants who have received an upgrade and gone through the program. So we would like to have help in finding those people, talking to them and asking them if they'd agree to meet with us and plan out how we can do that. Second, we need to connect with workers who have done home inspections. What happens in a home inspection from the worker's point of view? What does he do when he goes in there? Is it ever difficult? Is there difficulty communicating? We want all of that stuff to be out there and clear. Third, we need to connect with workers who perform the actual upgrades. Interview them, maybe if possible, film them doing an upgrade. And next slide, please. So we need some support in this. We'd like contact information and help getting in touch with households that have received the upgrades, contact information for companies that perform the upgrades, metrics. And I spoke briefly with Amy Edge, who came and presented the award. And I gave her my card and I said, wow. And she'd mentioned some of those metrics when she was talking about it. She said, well, there's so 900,000 megawatts or kilowatt hours or something like that of energy saved. And I said, I want to hear more about that. And she said, okay, I'll get back in touch with you. She hasn't, but help on that would be great. And information about how many applications have been turned in, how many have been accepted, how many upgrades have been completed. And is that the last one? Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, this is also, Sierra Club members have noticed that this doesn't seem to be widely publicized. Like KBA has great publicity, put billboards up, $400 rebate for electric car chargers, and you're putting in this great broadband thing. They were in my backyard today. The dogs were barking away. I said, no, don't bark. These are cool guys. But I don't see a lot of publicity saying, hey, save money on your bill, income qualified, home efficiency upgrades. What about there's 11 KUB payment kiosks. Do the people who sit behind the counter there have paper copies of the application? Paper copies of the application would be a really big help, because that means you could go and look at the application. When you do an application like this online, you see one thing at a time, and it's confusing or difficult sometimes to back up. And if you're a renter or if you're a homeowner, the application changes in the middle. And there's also a switch up, because you're really applying to TVA, not to KUB, because TVA provides the program, but KUB retails it, if that's the right way to put it. So those things are not necessarily clear, and community members that get the presentations over at SEED, they don't get that at all. So that thing, the thing that's in the people sitting around a table in that video, I think I sent an email back to you saying, oh, that's the one that's really cool, where you have a group of people, community members, going through the application and talking about the whole program, and there's staff or people there who know exactly what it is. Let's do that. And I'd like to put that in our video. Have posters at the kiosks so that it's clear to anybody who shows up, hey, put a billboard on the highway like about the broadband. But it's the one-on-one help with the application that I think is the most important. Oh yeah, but there is chat help on the application, but it's not during the weekend. So that people who have Monday through Friday jobs probably couldn't get that chat help. And also, the community members, the community engagement specialists at SEED, hire and train them so they can help with the application process. So that's what we've done, and that's what we're about to do, and that's the help we need. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Kent. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Kent? Erin?
In your cache of existing videos, did it include some of the ones we did with Keem from 2015? We've probably got some good B-roll footage we could get you.
There is some
Okay.
B-roll footage, but I tend to see like the cameras goes like that past an HVAC unit or some technology, but no one's sitting down and saying, okay, now this is your circuit breaker board, and this is what has to be done to it, and this is why we put in a new one. No one is getting into the details like that. So yeah, it's covered. There's one that interviews a recipient. A man sits there and talks about how great the program was, and there is a little bit. There's a picture outside of the fan for the heat pump HVAC and stuff. It's shown, but this is the stuff that's not written yet because I don't know what all those people are going to say. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to just do a TV commercial for the Home Uplift program. I want to have I want the community to present it. So in the video we're making, the community members will be the people you see talking about it. They will be the ones, you know, in my career as an actor, I made most of my money doing TV commercials. And I didn't spend most of my time doing it, but I learned there's two parts. There's two main parts in a TV commercial that are like the good parts. One is the schlub who does not use the product. And that's the fun character to play because like any dramatic role, that's the character with a problem. The other character is God. And he says, trust me, it's a fine product. And he usually has a deep, manly voice, although it's not necessarily to have that anymore. But I don't want the voice of God in this. I want it all to be the community talking to themselves, talking to each other.
Okay.
Which God are you going to put in?
Yeah, no, well, we'll have to audition that part. So you can come.
When do you want to have this done, though?
Well, that's a good question. In talking to Stan, we figure we need to have it done by near the end of the year.
Okay, yeah.
Because this could be useful for a few years into the future.
Right.
Well, Kent's comments and his presentation are a nice segue into one of the things we'd like to do today. And since we started 5 or 10 minutes late, I'm going to indulge your patience and see if you're willing to follow up on this last segment. One of them, and first of all, I want to thank Erin and Stephen and Kent. I know you all put some time into handout slides and thinking about what you wanted to say today. An important part of the act is how KUB is going to communicate opportunities for customers to the public. And they are starting to work on a communications plan, but before they finish it, they want to get some input from you. So Susan, do you want to chat a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd say you all are pretty familiar with many of the tools that are in our toolkit, and we are starting to think about how to apply those to customer information about opportunities that are available to them, particularly through the IRA. We've already started working on a KUB webpage that would have good links to resources there. We can publicize that through our website, through our app, putting that right on the front page, front and center when people open our webpage, social media, all the things that you would expect. Importantly, I think we also focus on making sure employees have that information too. And we have what's called fast facts that our CSRs use when they're on the phone with customers. And so, when those opportunities arise, they're able to point to those things as well. Bill messages, for those who still get a paper bill, you also get it when you log in for your electronic bill. we, I think, have some opportunities with the workshops that are already going on in the community and conservation workshops to use that as a forum for letting people know how they can, now that they've got that knowledge, take it home, apply it, and actually get support for that. So I think you mentioned some other ideas, billboards and videos and payment centers, and I think all those are good. But I think, you know, the input that would be helpful to us is not only the means and methods, but also just, you know, what's going to be most effective from a messaging perspective. I think some of the things you're talking about, that trusted messenger is important, but at the end of the day, it's taxes and rebates and filing for those things, and those are a little bit more complicated to put on a billboard, for example. So we just really welcome any suggestions or thoughts you guys have about the communities you interact with and what is most effective when we're talking about things like tax rebates and tax credits, that sort of thing. Don't all talk at once.
Does anybody have any thoughts?
KCDC don't y'all provide tax assistance when people are filing their income tax? And would that,
Rita?
do y'all, yeah, do you introduce, could you introduce programs like this at that time? I don't know.
This into the VITA income tax program?
Yeah, that help with filing tax returns.
Well, we might be able to. I mean, it's a pretty focused program. You know, people who come are really interested in getting their taxes done, and and the volunteers are particularly trained. And of course, it's we could have maybe like some tables. You know, if there were volunteers who wanted to set up while the tax filing was going on, then people could stop at another table. I'm not so sure that the volunteers that actually do the income tax returns would be the people who would, you know, also do this. They're very focused into what they do. We have the lead tax filing group in the South, so it's a very compelled group, but I think we could connect, you know, this sort of information, but probably not with the same volunteers. We might have to have some people who were particularly trained to provide this sort of information and maybe to do the application. I mean, we do hands-on assistance with applications all the time at CAC. I mean, that's one of the best ways to get people to apply is simply sit down and have someone go through the application with them and make sure it's correct, make sure all the documentation is provided. It's not particularly difficult, you know, for people who have a little bit of training to do that. So it could be a good possibility of connecting. You know, that program is focused over a certain period of time, you know, from the time when the tax forms come out at the end of January through the middle of April. So it's, you know, we do taxes on a year-round basis, but not to a volume where this would be. But there would be some possibilities if we wanted to plan it in for next time to have a group of people who would be there at the same time wanting to do those applications.
Just seems like there might be some overlap, and if we're already thinking about taxes and saving money, and next year it might be a good opportunity to meet people who would be interested in some sort of service like that.
One thing that we might be able to help you with, we have a system of videos that we deal with called Budget in a Box, and these are very popular. We developed them for local, but they're actually being used by the IRS across the country. And they're on different topics, on payday loans and on things of this sort. So I think we could probably do a Budget in the Box on this program and see if, you know, it would have to be localized, you know, I mean, but we have the capacity to develop those, and volunteers develop them. They're very popular. They get a lot of views, And we've gotten a lot of positive response from all over the country, really, from people who've used them.
That's a great idea.
Quick question. I haven't talked to the folks at SEED, but what is the response rate they're getting on the door knocking, the canvassing, as far as actually filling out applications? Have they given you all any status on how that's going?
I think what we've been able to determine so far is in the 20-ish range, as far as
About
people.
20 applications?
Yeah, approximately.
But, out of how many doors knocked?
Over 300.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that we're looking at, and we want to be really sensitive to seed, so we're not necessarily looking in Knoxville yet, but we're having conversations about Middle Tennessee and Middle Tennessee Electric and NES and potentially EPB about, is there a way to hook up with some groups that are actually have field operations, really fairly sophisticated canvases, and go out there and do the sort of the triple play, where you talk about the uplift program for the right demographic, means tested. The rebates are going to, they're the ones that I think is missing, because if you're going to design, because that's going to apply to everybody, right, across the board, and then you have the other means test at the tax side, right, and so we've got to see how they're going to design the program and how we're going to be able to talk about the program. But it does seem to me that, really going out and working the doors at scale, I mean, because there are groups that can really can cut a turf and really canvas and stuff like that. And then you can really think about whether you can drive those, if you need to, then you canvas on a door and somebody's like, I'm interested, but they need follow-up to come and actually help them do the application, or you're leaving materials and then you can do follow-up and stuff like that. And there, it would just seem interesting to design an education program that had that hardwired in. I don't know if SEED can scale at that level, but there are people that, when you go out, particularly if you tap into some of these people that have, like, the political door knocking stuff, that stuff, they're knocking doors. I mean, like, really knocking doors.
Right,
to scale. And that may be what we need to think about, really, if we want to jump this up even more to get in touch with more people. Because I think it's going to take that one-to-one contact is going to be the best in a lot of ways.
So you mentioned Chattanooga and Nashville. Are they doing it there?
No, they're not. They're not. But what we're looking to do is hook up groups that have actual field operations, and then try to go and do the canvassing to scale and see what that looks like. Because, again, I may be wrong. It may be that it's too difficult to do. But if we had the rebate parameters, I think you could go, you would have a high degree of confidence on every door you knocked on that you're going to be able to sell them something.
Yeah.
I mean, sell them something that's going to be valuable to them. Right now, if you're only doing the uplift, then that's means tested. The tax rebates is means tested in the other direction, right? And then we don't have the direct rebate program. So something to think about. I mean, I'd love to kick around ideas with that, and circle back up with Stan and those guys and just see what it could do. But there are people that run real serious canvases, and that's the kind of stuff I think you may need to be thinking about.
I say this as someone who signed up once 6 years ago at a home fair, and now get called twice a year on schedule from American Home Improvement, trying to get me to redo my siding or my bathroom or my tiles or whatever. I mean, to me, the companies that have the most to gain from the rebates, especially when it's open-ended, I would hope that the private sector companies
Start picking up.
see the potential sales that they can accelerate and drive through this. And, to me, it would be how to kind of the KUB materials, give them an easy pathway to make that case so that, and it goes back a little bit to kind of that solar conversation years ago where it was like you started to see some pretty fly-by-night, maybe, it's still happening, some fly-by-night solar contractors and selling people things that they couldn't deliver on. And, in some ways it'd be, how does KUB and reputable messengers, whether it's, community-based partners or otherwise, but how do they become a place where there's kind of centralized information that is accurate, trusted, been vetted, that complements then I think what becomes a sales job at the end of the day of like,
Well, yeah,
you know.
it is
Yeah.
like a sales job, and it's interesting,
Yeah.
In talking to Stan and JD, these guys are car salesmen. So they actually have a background in sales. And I was kind of bugging them a little bit. Come on, you guys, you got to close here. And it's interesting because you're not really selling, it's free. So Stan, there's two, like you said that one-on-one is important. I think you're right about that. But there's another thing that Seed is trying to figure out how to do, and I got to get back over there and hang with him again on Thursday nights at 6 o'clock. But Stan talks about changing the culture. It's a cultural change. And I think there's a point to that as we all try and improve our lives, there's a relationship between improving your life and energy consumption. Generally speaking, throughout history, the more energy you consume, the better your life is. The more comfortable you are, the more educated you are, the healthier you are, the longer you'll live and all that. So people have that built-in association. So if you want to say, okay, now you can improve your life by using less energy, that's a cultural change. And it's a cultural change that's different for different socioeconomic groups. It's different for poor people, it's different for rich people. I mean, you can go around. I walked around in Switzerland. I was visiting friends in this really high income area near Zurich. And I took a picture of an octagonal house with plants growing all over the roof. Super environmental millionaire house. So that it was almost like, there's a person showing off how rich they are by saying how environmental they are, and like that their roof is super efficient and they don't even probably need a heat pump air conditioner. The house cools itself. So there is, somebody who is at the pinnacle of success and is, using way less energy. And so how do we find a way to make that culture shift across? And the perception about that, the cultural advantage people perceive is going to be different in different socioeconomic groups. So that's the harder part, I think. That's not the sales job,
Right.
person to person. That's a kind of another thing that I've talked about. How do we make Knoxville be a city of energy efficiency maniacs?
I'm going to bring you back to KUB's problem.
Yeah. Well,
Which is trying to communicate very complicated
Yeah,
information
that's right.
to their customers. So, are there
Susan,
any
when
other thoughts?
when are you going to try to have something? Are you all going to wait until the rebate thing is assembled, or are you going to try to roll some early stuff out?
We're in the process of developing it now.
Okay.
And I think the site, the mock-up that I was looking at has live links to the rebates, to the tax credits information.
Okay.
And coming soon kind of for the rebates.
And that would be in conjunction with the home uplift, so you would be making those available in the same sort of web space or whatever?
Well, that's a question. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
I don't know necessarily, and Chastity, I know you've been working on this, I don't know necessarily that we've been packaging it quite that way, but if we think that having that suite altogether would be
Yeah.
helpful.
So we have landing pages, and a lot of the time we'll try to connect related information, so it'll be its own separate page. But I believe the intent is to have like a promo panel on the weatherization page, and then probably a promo panel for the weatherization page on the IRA page.
Yeah.
Linked.
I know when we're trying to look at how we're going to package this, we've been doing some webinars and playing around with it. Writ large, I think having a one-stop shopping where somebody
Yeah.
across all means. But again, until we get that rebate middle, thing, it's
Yeah.
you're kind of dealing with the edges on both sides. So it'd probably be tricky. But I mean, we would love to. I mean, I'm happy to put some of our comms people and some of the folks that are thinking about it in touch with you guys, and because we're all about wanting to promote the hell out of what the IRA is doing and everything, and then again with the TVA uplift and what y'all are doing is just is great because it just creates a complete package. So yeah, I mean,
That's really helpful.
yeah.
But I think that your question, Don, about how do we communicate complex information, I mean, I sent everybody the link to that video I started out with Joanne just talking at her kitchen table there. And that's what she's doing. She's communicating a lot of complicated information. And I thought that she chose certain things very well, distinguishing between the rebate for the new car and the used car, and pointing out that the used car rebate would actually be like an on-the-hood discount. Next year, you go to the dealer, and you don't have to wait for tax time. And she communicated that right away. And I remember when I was exploring that stuff, it was a while before I grasped that. I had to dig through some complicated stuff. So I think there's an advantage to having a communication like that, where if you've got, it has to be the right person.
Yeah.
But the person, there's got to be someone you can sit there, they'll be sitting there somewhere, like at a kitchen table or whatever environment is most appropriate, and a person that can hold your attention and just talk through some stuff. That video is 18 minutes long.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you think, I'd love to hear your thoughts about watching the whole thing. Do you fall asleep or want to go to the refrigerator, or does it actually hold your attention? Because that's the point. You have to be able to concentrate for a period of time to be able to understand the IRA benefits. There's no way out of it. Everybody has to be able to do the work.
Another thing is, if in the event TVA is selected to administer for the state of Tennessee, I'm sure they'll have their own promotional efforts behind that as well. So in particular for smaller local power companies in the state. So.
Well, I think, Mark, to me, when I look at the IRA stuff in particular and the rebates, I gander to say the feds are probably throwing a ton of cash behind the promotion of it. And so to the extent that there are programs that are going to be the same no matter where you are, maybe that's a Tennessee Valley specific, type of approach. But, to me it would be local resources, thinking about how do you get that standardized resource into the hands of the right communities, the right messengers, and or linking it with the local resources to say, well, here are the 10 trade allies that are approved under TVA's contractor network that work in the Knoxville region. So it's almost like less time spent on the big picture unpacking of the rebate, because somebody else is going to do that and probably do it better than we can do it afford locally. But then how do we make sure that the local application of it is really solid?
Yes.
Because, I'm thinking like you could Google IRA and it's like, at some point I hope the feds will have a really good one-pager that makes this, what Joanne has done so nicely, makes that applicable for anybody. And so then the KUB challenge becomes, well, how do we make that really relevant for people within the Knoxville region?
I thought the materials that SACE had at your meeting in May, like maybe 3 pages, or had FAQ, I thought that was helpful. I thought that was laid out in a fashion that was really understandable.
We've gotten a positive response, and we'll see. I mean, we're going to be in Maynardville the 27th?
Yes.
6 to 8, so I know that's going to be a tough crowd to get out. So hopefully we'll get some folks out, but and then we need to sort of collectively think about where we want to do the third one, if we want to, bring it. But yeah, I thought that dialogue for the people there was deep and thoughtful, and we continue to get a lot of inquiries about stuff. We framed this thing around the clean energy generation, and we're pushing that narrative that people have an opportunity to be a part of, big change. And this whole, everything associated with the energy efficiency piece is the easiest part of being part of the clean energy generation, because it's kind of a no-brainer, you know, it's just, you can make real change in real time. But yeah, we'll see. We're thinking about, we're playing with the idea of doing some radio to try to promote the event in a targeted way. So I need to circle back up with my team about what they've learned about that. But, you know, sometimes, you know, radio ads can be a way to catch people's attention.
Yeah. Actually, I was in North Carolina a couple of weeks ago, and there was radio advertisements about the rebates and tax credits. So
Who was doing it?
it was a group called Energy Solutions.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, we have gone past your time by about 10 minutes. And I know that KUB appreciates any of you have other thoughts that you'd like to share with them. There's not a July Board of Commissioners meeting, but the information you shared today will be shared with them at an upcoming meeting. Our next meeting will be on September 7th, and the focus is going to be KUB's workforce development efforts. They, like every other company in town, they could use some assistance to talk about recruiting opportunities and get some input from you.
All right.
So we are officially adjourned. It was
Thank
good to
you.
see everybody.